Jason Miller sat quietly in room 3B, pencil untouched, solving a calculus exam in his head. 5 minutes later, security dragged him out like a criminal. His crime? Solving too fast, too clean, too black. Cameras caught it. The internet erupted, but what the school did next, no one saw coming. Before we deep dive into this interesting story, subscribe to our channel, and tell us where are you watching from. Share in the comments below. The fluorescent lights above room 3B flickered faintly, casting a sterile haze across a classroom that smelled faintly of whiteboard marker and decades-old carpet. The air was still. Test day. Desks were spaced a precise 2 feet apart. Pencils were sharpened to regulation length. Tension hung over the room like static. At the very back of the classroom, behind 3 rows of chattering students, sat a boy who almost never made noise. Jason Miller, 16 years old, leaned forward with his arms resting flat against the desk, eyes half-lidded as if he were half asleep. He wore a forest green hoodie with the strings tucked inside. His sneakers were quiet on the floor. No headphones, no phone, just silence. But behind his silence, a storm of thought raged. Jason didn't need to study like the others. He had read the entire pre-calculus textbook before the semester began. Not because someone told him to, because he wanted to know. Math wasn't numbers to him. It was music. It had rhythm. It had logic. It had power. He could solve complex systems of equations in his head in the time it took others to find a calculator app. He never told anyone this, especially not in this school. Elkwood High wasn't built to recognize minds like Jason's. In the eyes of most teachers, he was just another quiet black kid who didn't participate. His silence was assumed to be disinterest. His hoodie meant defiance. His downcast eyes, disrespect. But they never asked why he was quiet.
Not once.
Miss Claremont stood at the front of the room, a stiff presence in a gray blazer and clunky heels that announced her arrival wherever she walked. She didn't like Jason. She never said it out loud, but it showed in the small ways. The way she skipped over him when calling on students. The way her eyebrows tightened when he walked in. The way she locked eyes on him when she gave her standard pre-test speech. Any form of dishonesty will result in immediate removal and investigation. Jason could feel it again now. Her stare drilling into the side of his face like she was waiting for him to slip. He didn't plan to. The room hushed as test booklets were passed out, their pages crisp and heavy. Jason took his copy, nodded quietly, and waited. His pencil lay untouched on the desk, as the others began scribbling furiously, flipping pages with nervous energy. Jason sat perfectly still. He read question 1, then question 2, then question 3. Within seconds, the answers arranged themselves inside his mind. Variables simplified, coefficients balanced, graphs plotted. He saw it all like snapshots. He didn't need to write yet. He was building the full layout in his head, running through each question mentally before committing anything to paper. To anyone watching, it might have looked like he wasn't trying. To Miss Claremont, it looked like something else entirely. Her heels clicked slowly down the aisle. She circled behind Jason once, paused, walked past, then circled again. She didn't stop at other students' desks, just him. Jason noticed, of course. He noticed everything, but he remained focused, finishing the mental steps for the first 10 questions before finally picking up his pencil. Just as his hand moved, she spoke. "Is everything all right, Jason?" Her voice cut through the quiet room like a fire alarm. All heads turned. He nodded once. "I'm fine." "You haven't written anything," she said, louder this time. "You understand this is a timed test?" "I know," Jason replied, his voice steady. "I was working through the problems."
Miss Claremont's lips thinned. She didn't say anything else, just turned and walked back to the front, her expression unreadable. But her eyes never left him.
Jason lowered his head again and began writing. In his methodical handwriting, he laid out the first 12 answers in less than 4 minutes. The work was clean, no erasures, no hesitation. Each line built logically on the last. He even annotated the steps, not because he needed to, but because he knew they'd ask how he did it. Still, the tension in the room remained fixed on him. Near the front, 2 students whispered to each other. He didn't even flip the page yet. Another replied, "He's probably cheating." Jason heard that too. He always did. He moved on to the next section, integrating a compound function in his head, calculating the area under a curve as fast as he blinked. It felt natural. It felt calm. But outside his mind, Storm clouds were gathering. At the front of the room, Miss Claremont walked over to the intercom panel and pressed a button. "Can I have Officer Reynolds and Principal Skinner to room 3B, please?" Immediately. The sound echoed across the room like a thunderclap. Jason's pencil paused mid-equation. A murmur rippled across the class. Eyes darted toward him. Someone coughed. Another snickered nervously. The room, once silently focused on math, now buzzed with the energy of suspicion. He knew exactly what was happening. It wasn't the first time something like this had happened in school. Just never this public. Never this cruel. In a school full of students, it was always the quiet ones who were watched hardest, if they were black. Especially if they were smart. Miss Claremont didn't say his name, but everyone knew. She stood with folded arms, watching him like a hawk, guarding stolen treasure. There was no concern on her face, no hesitation, just quiet satisfaction, like she'd finally caught a criminal mid-heist. Jason clenched his jaw but said nothing. He didn't stop writing, even as the door opened. Two figures entered. Officer Reynolds, bulky and red-faced, resting his hand lazily near his holster, and Principal Skinner, tie askew, eyes already scanning the room for disruption. They stopped at Jason's desk. "Stand up, please," Skinner said quietly. Jason didn't move. "Why?" Skinner's voice hardened. Now, the room held its breath. Jason slowly stood, leaving his test open. His pencil rolled gently across the desk. The principal gestured toward the door. "Come with us." As he walked between the desks, heads turned and phones came out. Screens glowed, as some students subtly hit record. Others watched in disbelief. No explanation, no warning, just removal. Ms. Claremont gave the faintest nod of approval as he passed. Jason didn't look back. He just walked, down the hallway, past the lockers, into the main office, a place that always smelled like old paper and new mistakes. He was led into a room, sat down, and left alone for several minutes. Then the door opened again. Principal Skinner returned, along with another assistant. No one looked at him. On the desk in front of them lay his test, closed now. Accused of cheating. Without saying it, they were making it clear. "You were seen not writing," Skinner began. Then suddenly filling in pages of answers. "That doesn't track." "I solve in my head," Jason said quietly. Skinner raised an eyebrow. "That's not standard procedure. We don't allow mental calculations for this exam without shown work." "I showed the work," Jason said, calmer than he felt. The assistant flipped through the test. "It's too clean, too fast. No rough work. That suggests you may have had prior access to the material." Jason stared. "You think I cheated?" "We didn't say that," Skinner replied, though the room told a different story. They didn't ask for his side. They didn't ask how he got to the answers. They didn't ask about the hours he spent studying formulas for fun, or the notebooks filled with problems at home. They had already made up their minds. And that was the moment Jason knew. This wasn't about math. This was about him. He was guilty because he didn't fit their script. Because his silence was too loud, his brilliance too quiet, his presence too defiant without ever saying a word. They told him he'd have to retake the test under surveillance, with no mental solving, only written out steps. As if genius had to be loud to be believed. As if brilliance in black skin was a threat. Jason said nothing, just stared at the door. And as he sat in that chair, breath shallow and fists clenched under the desk, he had no idea that outside the office door, a student's video was already going viral. The teacher already made up her mind before the test even began. The room still vibrated with the aftershock of Jason's removal, even though only seconds had passed since he was escorted out. The murmurs hadn't died down. They had only softened into furtive glances and shared confusion. But while the students whispered behind cupped hands, Claremont stood perfectly still at the front of the classroom, hands clasped behind her back, chin raised just slightly, as if ensuring the room returned to order were a task that proved her authority. What she didn't expect was that order would not return easily. The moment Jason had been taken out, something had shifted. The test booklets no longer felt heavy with pressure, but heavy with unfairness. Even the air moved differently, as if the fluorescent lights themselves had dimmed to reflect what had happened. But the story wasn't over for Jason, not even close. Back in the main office hallway, Jason stood quietly in front of a row of lockers, waiting for someone to tell him what to do next. His breathing was controlled, almost painfully so, like he didn't want the walls to hear how anxious he was. He could still feel the eyes of the classroom on him, Still hear the shuffling of feet. Still sense the phone screens rising like witnesses that wouldn't defend him. A door opened behind him. "Jason," a voice said gently. It was Miss Turner, the school counselor. She wasn't like the others. She never spoke down to him, never treated him like a suspicious object, sitting at the back of the class. She stepped forward, her brow furrowed with concern, her hands holding a clipboard that she didn't bother pretending to read. "I heard what happened," she said softly. "Are you okay?" Jason swallowed hard. "I didn't do anything." Her shoulders dropped, the truth of his words sinking into her before he even finished saying them. "I know you didn't. That's why I came." He stared at her, waiting for the part that always came next, the part where adults said they understood but still didn't know what to do. "Let's talk," she said. "Somewhere away from all of this." She walked him toward her office, but before she opened the door she paused. She glanced back toward room 3B, where whispers still traveled through the air like static. Her voice lowered, almost to a whisper. "Did Miss Claremont say anything to you before the test?" Jason nodded. "She asked why I wasn't writing. And you told her." "I told her I was thinking." Something tightened in Miss Turner's expression, a flicker of frustration that she quickly masked. "Okay," she murmured. "That shouldn't have been enough to pull you out." Jason looked down. It was enough for her. Inside the office, he sat across from her desk. She leaned forward, hands folded together. "Jason, you know you're allowed to think quietly during an exam, right? There's nothing suspicious about that." He exhaled slowly, an exhale filled with years of being misunderstood. "She doesn't think that," he muttered. Miss Turner hesitated. She knew there were lines she wasn't allowed to cross in language. But she also knew the truth. "Some people see silence as defiance when it comes from a black student," she said carefully. "And some people see confidence as threat." Jason didn't respond, but his eyes flickered with painful recognition. She continued, "I watched you work through problems mentally during your last benchmark test. You were focused, quiet. That's just how your mind works." "Not to her," he whispered. Before she could respond, a sudden knock echoed from the office doorway. Miss Claremont stepped inside without waiting to be invited. Her posture was rigid, her tone clipped. "I need to speak to the student," she announced.
Miss Turner rose. "We're in the middle of—"
"This is urgent." Jason stiffened instantly, like the air had frozen around him. Ms. Claremont folded her arms. "I need you to explain your testing behavior, Jason." Miss Turner frowned. "He already did." "He didn't explain it to me," Claremont said. Jason glanced at Miss Turner, then back at his teacher. "I was thinking," he repeated, voice steady but tired. "Thinking," she echoed sharply, as if the word offended her. "You stared at the paper without making a single mark. That's not normal exam behavior." "It is for him," Miss Turner argued. Claremont didn't acknowledge her. Her focus stayed pinned on Jason. "You have a reputation for minimal class participation. You rarely show work. When a student who never writes suddenly fills multiple pages quickly and perfectly, we have to consider the possibility of—" "I didn't cheat," Jason cut in, no longer able to swallow the accusation. Miss Claremont didn't look convinced. "Then help me understand." He met her eyes directly for the first time. "I solve things in my head." She blinked. "Complex pre-calculus equations? Mental?" "Yes. You expect us to believe that?" Miss Turner's voice sharpened.
Why wouldn't you?
"Because it isn't typical," Claremont snapped. "And when behaviors are atypical, especially during state testing," Jason interrupted. "Everyone else got to take the test quietly. I wasn't bothering anyone." "Your behavior raised red flags," she insisted. "No," Miss Turner said pointedly. "Your assumptions did." A tense silence filled the room. Slowly, Claremont straightened. "Regardless of how you frame it, we must investigate potential misconduct. School policy mandates it." "You didn't investigate," Miss Turner said. "You reacted." Claremont ignored her again. "We need to determine whether you had prior access to the exam material." Jason stared at her, disbelief spreading across his face. "Why would I have?" "You tell us," she said coldly. Something inside Jason broke, not loudly, not visibly, but in a quiet internal collapse that came from years of trying to be careful, years of walking gently around authority, years of being hyper-aware of what teachers saw when they looked at him. He had done everything right, and it still wasn't enough. Miss Turner rose, placing herself subtly between them. "You're not questioning him alone. He's a student," Claremont said, "and I'm his teacher. And I'm the counselor, Turner replied. And he deserves support. Support, Claremont repeated with disdain. He deserves accountability. The air tightened. Jason's fists curled in his lap, not out of anger but out of deep ache. The kind that comes when you're punished for being misunderstood. Claremont took a breath, turning sharply. He'll need to retake the exam. Under supervision. With work shown line by line. It's non-negotiable, Jason muttered. I already took it. Not correctly, she replied. And if I write it slower? He asked bitterly. If I pretend it's hard, will that make it believable enough? The room froze. Claremont's gaze hardened. Watch your tone. Miss Turner stepped in. He's allowed to express frustration. This situation warrants it. Claremont exhaled sharply. I'm going back to the classroom. The administrators will handle next steps. She turned on her heel, then paused at the doorway, glancing back at him with a cold diagnosing stare. Silence is not an excuse, she said. Then she left. The moment the door closed, the tension collapsed like a structure pulled from its foundation. Miss Turner knelt beside Jason's chair. I'm sorry, she whispered. He didn't speak. He just stared at the carpet, watching shadows move across the fibers as students walked past outside. After a long silence, he whispered. She already decided I was cheating before I picked up the pencil. Miss Turner nodded sadly. I know. She didn't come over to ask what I was doing, he murmured. She came over looking for a reason. That's why I'm here, she said softly. You won't go through this alone. But just as she spoke, a thin static crackled from the intercom in the hallway. A familiar voice echoed through the corridor. This is Ms. Claremont in room 3B. I need security to return immediately. Miss Turner stiffened. What now? And then the twist hit. She called security again, but this time Jason wasn't even inside her classroom. She hits the intercom button and calls for school security. Room 3B had never been quieter. Even the ticking of the wall clock seemed hesitant, as if it too were waiting for what would happen next. Every student had paused their pencils. Their gazes had slowly shifted from their test booklets to the classroom door. It was open now. 2 security officers stood in the doorway. Officer Reynolds in his Navy uniform, expression unreadable, and Officer Valdez, younger, eyes scanning the room, like he was walking into a potential threat. Miss Claremont stepped back, clearing a path as if she had rehearsed this moment. Mr. Miller, she called out, her voice tight but measured. Please come with us. All 30 heads turned toward the back of the room. Jason Miller, still seated, looked up slowly, his pencil midair. His face showed no fear, only confusion wrapped in a dull ache that had been forming since the moment she first doubted him. He stood without a word. The silence broke when a student whispered, too loud to be private. What'd he do? Someone else muttered. Is this about the test? Phones emerged, not in defiance but instinct. In 2025, high school students recorded everything: fights, dances, food, and now, Jason's humiliation. He walked toward the front of the room slowly, flanked by security before he even reached the teacher's desk. He didn't resist. He didn't ask why, because deep down, he already knew. This wasn't about disruption or behavior. It was about perception. A quiet black student didn't fit the mold of mathematical brilliance. Not in room 3B, not under Ms. Claremont's watch. One student, a white girl named Carrie, who sat 2 rows up, caught herself whispering, "This is messed up." But she didn't stop it. No one did. As Jason stepped into the hallway, the classroom erupted, not in protest but in whispers, texts, and Snapchats. Back in the hallway, Officer Reynolds took the lead, walking slightly ahead while Valdez stayed behind. Jason felt boxed in. I didn't do anything, he said quietly. Reynolds didn't answer. I was just doing the test, he added. You can explain that to the principal, Valdez finally offered. His tone neutral, but his pace never slowed. Jason passed familiar lockers, the murals painted by last year's seniors, the display board celebrating Black Excellence Month. He stared at it as they walked past, featuring 3 athletes, 2 musicians, and not a single scholar. He felt the irony press into his chest like weight. They reached the administrative wing, where the school secretary looked up, her brow furrowed. Again? She murmured. Jason's ears caught that, again. Principal Skinner's office door was already open. In, Reynolds said. Jason stepped inside. The door shut behind him. No one asked if he wanted to sit. No one asked if he needed water. No one even looked him in the eye. Skinner stood near his desk, arms folded. A man in his early 50s with a permanent crease between his brows. Like every student was a problem waiting to happen. Jason, he began without greeting. We're trying to understand what happened during your exam today. Jason waited for a question. There wasn't one. I was doing the test, he said. I solve things in my head before I write. I've done it in her class before. Skinner turned to the assistant principal, Miss Donnelly, seated in the corner. Was he disruptive? No, she said. But the concern was raised about the timing. He was observed not writing for a significant period, and then suddenly filling pages. That's not illegal, Jason said, firmer now. It's called thinking. Skinner raised a brow. It's also unusual. And when a student finishes complex questions without showing struggle, it raises questions. Not if you know what you're doing, Jason replied. Donnelly leaned forward. We're not accusing you, but we have to verify academic integrity. This is a state exam. Then check my answers, he shot back. If I'm wrong, fail me. But don't assume I cheated just because I didn't act how you expected. The room fell quiet. Skinner walked to the window, pretending to inspect the blinds. Per district policy, when academic integrity is in question, we remove the student and assess in a controlled setting. Jason stared at him. So, I'm guilty unless I can prove otherwise. Skinner didn't answer. Donnelly sighed. You'll be given a chance to retake the test in an isolated environment. And if I pass again? Jason asked. Then the matter is resolved, she said blandly. He looked between them. And the part where you pulled me out in front of 30 people? Where everyone saw security drag me out? That just goes away? That's not the focus right now, Skinner replied. Maybe not for you. Jason's voice had changed, still quiet, but sharp now. Controlled. Outside the office, someone walked by quickly. Jason could hear Miss Turner's voice speaking to someone fast, urgent, just out of reach. He turned back to Skinner. You didn't even ask what I was thinking about during the test. You assumed I was stalling. But I was solving it in my head. That's how I work. Skinner finally met his eyes. You've been known to disengage in class. That pattern creates concern. No, Jason snapped. You created the pattern. You all did. I sit quietly, and suddenly, I'm a threat. I work fast, and suddenly it's suspicious. There's no version of me that's acceptable to you. Donnelly's expression flickered. Maybe guilt. Maybe discomfort. Reynolds shifted awkwardly by the door. Even Valdez seemed to glance away. Then, without warning, the office door opened, and Miss Turner stepped in. I need to speak with Jason, she said. Alone. Skinner frowned. We're in the middle of... I said alone, she repeated. He hesitated, then gestured toward the hallway. 5 minutes. The others filed out. The door clicked shut.
Miss Turner turned to Jason. I'm so sorry.
They think I cheated, he said. I know. They don't believe people like me can be smart quietly. I know, she whispered. And they're wrong. He sat down again, his hands finally shaking now that the others were gone. You're going to retake the exam? She asked. I don't wanna, he said. Not because I can't. Because I shouldn't have to prove I'm not a liar just to be believed. She nodded. Then we'll fight this differently. Jason blinked. What does that mean? She pulled out her phone and turned the screen toward him. It was a video. Someone had recorded the exact moment he was pulled out of room 3B. The angle was shaky, but the audio was clear. The caption read, "Why was this black student removed for doing math?" The video had 12,000 views already. She locked eyes with him. It's spreading. Jason felt his stomach drop, not from fear, but something else. Something bigger than the walls of Elkwood High. You're not invisible anymore, she said. And people are asking questions. He nodded slowly, absorbing it. But just as he started to find breath again, the door burst open. It was Miss Claremont. Her face was pale. Her voice trembled, not with emotion, but anger. Someone leaked a portion of the exam online, she snapped. And the answers match his perfectly. Jason looked up slowly. What? They think you had access, she hissed. Before the test. Jason stood, heart pounding. That's not true. Ms. Claremont glared at him. Then explain why your answers match every single leaked solution. Miss Turner stepped forward. You're accusing him based on something you can't verify? Claremont's voice rose. We've notified district admin. Until further notice, Jason is under academic review. Jason's hands tightened. His mind raced. This wasn't about suspicion anymore. This was a takedown. In the principal's office, they don't even ask him a question. The door closed behind Ms. Claremont, with a sharp click, but its echo stayed lodged in Jason's chest like a splinter. He stood frozen, jaw clenched, as Miss Turner hovered protectively nearby. Outside, the hallway had gone tense and quiet. Students had gathered near lockers, trying to appear casual as they eavesdropped. The video was still circulating, and the noise it created was starting to bleed through Elkwood High's polished floor. Inside the office, the room had grown colder. Within minutes, Principal Skinner returned, this time with Vice Principal Stanton. Stanton had a clipped walk and a clipboard glued to his hand like a badge of control. He closed the blinds of the office window behind him, darkening the room intentionally. He didn't sit. He didn't smile. He didn't ask how Jason was doing. "Let's get straight to it," he said. Jason braced himself. "We've reviewed the matching answers found in the leaked version of the exam." Stanton began, his tone formal and antiseptic, "and we've compared them to your submitted responses." Miss Turner tried to interject. "There's no indication the leak happened before or during the exam." "Miss Turner," Stanton cut her off. "We are not implying wrongdoing. Yet, we are exploring the possibility of a testing violation that may have impacted academic fairness." "You mean you're accusing him of cheating?" she snapped. Stanton didn't blink. "We're investigating behavior that raises red flags." "Because he solved the test in his head?" she pressed. Stanton turned to Jason, his expression unchanged. "Most students don't complete multi-step calculus problems mentally, especially not without rough work, when that student also has a history of disengagement." "I don't have a history," Jason said suddenly. Stanton tilted his head. "You don't participate in class. That doesn't mean I don't understand. It means I learn differently." "And yet," Stanton replied, "the performance you demonstrated is inconsistent with your classroom behavior." "I'm quiet," Jason said. "Not stupid." The words hit the desk like a hammer. Skinner cleared his throat but didn't defend him. He merely glanced at the folder in Stanton's hand. "We pulled your file," Stanton continued. "Your GPA is high, yes. But there are also notes teachers stating difficulty gauging your comprehension. Minimal engagement. Insubordination flags. That was because I didn't want to stand for the pledge once," Jason interrupted. "It's still noted. That's not academic dishonesty." Miss Turner fired back. "That's bias being treated as data." But the room was tilting fast. Stanton laid out the next steps like it was a legal proceeding. "The district is requiring a retest," he announced. "Same material, same structure, but this time you'll take it under direct supervision." "You mean in a glass room?" Jason muttered. "We mean monitored," Stanton corrected, "to ensure transparency. No calculator, no mental solving," Stanton said bluntly. "You must show all work, step by step. No shortcut." "You want me to pretend I can't think fast," Jason said. Stanton's voice hardened. "We want you to demonstrate your knowledge in a way that matches academic integrity standards. And if I don't, then the original test is invalidated." Just like that. Jason glanced at Miss Turner. Her eyes were already brimming with fury. She was barely containing. She looked ready to burst. But it wasn't her fight. Not fully. They weren't punishing Jason for cheating. They were punishing him for being unbelievable. For solving like no one expected someone like him to solve. He sat down again slowly, letting their words settle in the pit of his stomach. He had worked for years to be unseen, never because he wanted to hide, but because attention never led to safety. Now the very silence that had protected him was being used as a weapon to erase his brilliance, and they were doing it with paperwork. "We'll schedule the retest for tomorrow morning," Stanton said. "You'll report to room 109. Miss Madsen will proctor." Jason didn't respond. "I suggest you prepare accordingly." Miss Turner stood abruptly. "He doesn't need preparation. He already passed." Stanton didn't even glance at her. "Not under conditions we can accept." That was the line. That was the truth. It wasn't about proof. It was about comfort. His intelligence made them uncomfortable. His silence made them assume he had something to hide. And now, to fit their definition of brilliance, he had to dilute himself, water himself down, become smaller. Jason looked up, voice calm. "What if I say no?" Skinner leaned forward. "Excuse me? What if I refuse to retake the test?" he asked again. Stanton narrowed his eyes. "Then you forfeit your score. You'll receive a 0. Jason nodded slowly. "And if I retake it and pass, you'll say I studied the leaked version." "No," Stanton said quickly. "We'll consider it proof of comprehension. Unless I score higher, Then you'll say I cheated that one too. Stanton's face tightened. Jason continued. You already made up your mind. I've been here before, you know. Every time someone like me does something exceptional, they make us redo it. Not to verify it, but to diminish it. Skinner adjusted his tie. No one is diminishing anything. You already did. Stanton stepped forward. This is your opportunity to clear your name. Jason laughed under his breath. I didn't know it needed clearing. The air went heavy again. There was no sympathy in Stanton's face. No understanding in Skinner's. There was only a system doing what systems do. Preserve themselves. Miss Turner placed a hand on Jason's shoulder, grounding him. But inside he felt like something had cracked. Something important. He stood. I'm not retaking the test. Stanton blinked. Excuse me? I'm not doing it, Jason said. Louder now. Not because I can't, but because I won't let you treat me like I'm guilty for being smart in a way you didn't expect. Skinner stood. Jason, think carefully. I did, he said. Stanton stepped forward, voice dropping into warning. Refusing a retest will be recorded as a disciplinary action. You already labeled me, Jason replied. All I'm doing now is owning the label you gave me. The room stood still. Skinner looked almost baffled. Stanton didn't even pretend to understand. Miss Turner was the only one smiling now, small and proud. Jason walked toward the door. Every step measured, controlled. Just before exiting, he turned back. You're not asking for proof, he said. You're asking for permission to doubt me again. Then he left. But just as the door swung closed behind him, his phone buzzed. A notification from an unknown number lit up his screen. Hey, I know what they're doing to you. I have the original test file with metadata. They edited it. Let me show you. He refuses not out of arrogance, but out of dignity. The internet doesn't sleep. By 7:23 p.m., the video had already crossed 86,000 views. By 8:02, it was on its fourth repost to TikTok, with dramatic music and bold white text that read, Black Genius or Cheater. By 8:11, local news stations picked up the headline, High school student removed from test after suspicious behavior. And by 8:17, Jason's name was trending. He didn't know any of this yet. He was upstairs in his room, door closed, lights off, staring at the ceiling with his hoodie pulled halfway over his face. His phone buzzed every few seconds, first group chats, then unknown numbers, then anonymous notifications. He hadn't looked at any of them. Downstairs, his mother, Denise Miller, was on the phone for the third hour straight, first with the school district, then with her sister, now with a lawyer someone recommended through Facebook. Her voice was calm but brittle, like it would shatter if she raised it. No one told me he was being investigated, she repeated. No one called me during school hours. You don't get to decide that on your own. He's a minor. On the couch beside her, Jason's younger brother, Marcus, clutched the TV remote without pressing play. The living room was a frozen scene. Screens open, phone calls looping, no one breathing right. At 8:24, Jason's inbox exploded. You made the news. They're calling you a fraud. Some people think you're a math savant. Bro, check Twitter. It's crazy. Still, he didn't look. At 8:36, the first hate comment reached their home phone. Yes, the landline. A raspy voice left a voicemail. Tell your son he better stop lying to the world before someone makes him shut up. Denise sat frozen on the couch, phone still in her hand. At 8:50, she finally went upstairs. Jay, she said through the door. Can we talk? Silence. She knocked again. I know it's a lot, baby. But we have to talk about this. Jason finally pulled the door open just enough for her to step in. His room was dark, except for the faint light from his desk lamp and the dull glow of his laptop. On the screen, Twitter was open. His name, his face, the footage. Denise looked at him. They're using your face, like it doesn't belong to a real person, she whispered. Jason didn't say anything. He clicked on one of the videos. It had been edited slow motion as he's escorted out of the classroom, followed by a still of Ms. Claremont's face with a caption. This teacher couldn't handle his brilliance. That's not what happened, he muttered. I know, Denise said softly. But they don't care. Comments scrolled underneath. He definitely cheated. No calculator, no notes. Sounds fake. They just hate to see a black kid be smarter than them. Probably had the answers on his phone. Another race card being played. Denise placed a hand on his shoulder. This is how they flip the script. They plant doubt so no one sees the truth. He turned to her. I didn't ask for this. I know, she said. But now you're in it. At 9:10, the first major conspiracy thread hit Reddit. What if this was a staged publicity stunt? Notice how calm he is. Notice how clean his work was. Could be AI generated. Could be activist manipulation. By 9:42, someone doxed his address. Denise unplugged the Wi-Fi. Jason leaned forward, staring at the blank laptop screen. They're not trying to find the truth, he whispered. They're trying to break it. Denise knelt beside him. Then don't give them the satisfaction. I didn't even talk in class, he said, almost laughing. I did everything they said we were supposed to. Stay quiet, work hard, don't act out, blend in. And they still pulled you out. He nodded. That tells you everything you need to know. By 10:13, a major influencer posted the video with a fire emoji and the words, "This kid's a genius. Free him." It went viral again, this time for entertainment. At 10:26, the school district released a one-sentence statement. We are aware of the incident, involving a student's removal during standardized testing, and are conducting an internal review. No apology, no explanation, just cold PR. But at 10:41, in a quiet townhouse in Chicago, Dr. Nathaniel Avery clicked replay on the video. He had seen it reposted on an academic blog he followed. Something about educational bias and systemic suppression. He almost ignored it. Almost. But something about the boy in the video gave him pause. It wasn't just the way he moved. It was the way he paused before being taken out.
The way he looked around the room, not in fear, but in understanding, like he had seen this before.
Avery leaned back in his chair. He had, 30 years ago, himself. He reached for a dusty leather-bound notebook. Inside were pages of equations, scribbled long before digital calculators. When he too had been that kid. The one who answered questions too fast, who got accused of stealing test papers, who was removed from a math competition at 16 because someone decided he didn't fit the profile. He'd gone on to become one of the youngest black professors in applied mathematics at Northwestern. But not without scars. He clicked on Jason's name again, traced the online chatter, then paused. One of the screenshots from the video had captured Jason's open test booklet for a split second. A very zoomed in. The problem on the page was a complex curve analysis requiring integration of a function over an asymmetrical domain. The steps Jason wrote, exact. And not just that, elegant, clean. It wasn't just that he solved it, it was how he solved it. With fluid transitions between logic steps. No scribbles, no second guessing. Genius wasn't just in the answer, it was in the clarity. Avery sat up straighter. That's not something you steal, he whispered. That's something you are. He opened his browser. He still had contacts at the National Math Olympiad Committee. He began typing an email. Subject, urgent inquiry. Elkwood High student. But just before he hit send, he noticed something else. Another video had surfaced. Not the one from inside the classroom. This one was from inside the school office. The caption read, "Listen closely." Audio caught from hallway while the student was being questioned. He pressed play. The video was muffled, low quality. But at timestamp 0041, a voice faint, but audible says, "We can't have him making a scene. He's too calm, too confident. That makes people nervous." Another voice responded, "Let's push for a retest. If he cracks, we're clean." Avery froze. He replayed it. This wasn't just bias. This was deliberate orchestration. He opened a secure folder on his desktop, began compiling documents, set up a secure call with an education equity attorney, pulled his notes on past discrimination cases he'd advised on.
He didn't know this boy.
But he knew what this was, and he knew what it could become if no one intervened. He leaned back and whispered to himself, "They underestimated the wrong kid." A retired black professor sees the clip, and something about Jason catches his attention. Dr. Nathaniel Avery didn't sleep that night. His mind, trained for decades to untangle chaos into logic, couldn't rest. Not when what he'd seen in that short clip of Jason told him more than any news headline ever could. It wasn't just the math that caught his eye. It was the stillness in the boy's face, the defiant calm. It was familiar, too familiar. He had worn that same mask once, at 16, at 19, even as a professor, because brilliance wasn't armor when it lived in black skin. It was provocation. At 3:17 a.m., Avery sat hunched over his desk, a half-empty cup of cold coffee beside his laptop. His fingers tapped across keys with purpose, retracing the trail, Jason Miller's life had left behind, at least the parts the system hadn't scrubbed. He began with school district records. Elkwood Unified didn't have an open database, but Avery had been in academia long enough to know backdoor pathways. He entered through a staff-linked portal from a math consultant's page and searched the Student Achievement Registry. At first, nothing. But then he filtered for District Math League qualifiers. There, last year, Jason D. Miller, first place county-level pre-calc challenge. Why hadn't this been mentioned by any school official? He clicked deeper. Awards in algebra, statistics, geometry, all scored top percentile. But the accolades seemed to stop right around the start of his sophomore year. No entries, no updates. The digital trail ended like someone had shut a door. That's when Avery noticed a reference number in a faculty comment box. A flag code, P2714 application disrupted, Camp Newton. He paused. Camp Newton was the nation's most elite summer math institute for high school prodigies. Avery had helped design part of its gifted diagnostics protocol 20 years ago. The application process was rigorous, but not easily derailed, unless someone wanted it that way. He cross-referenced the code. The system claimed the application was withdrawn by school counselor due to behavioral red flag. Avery's brow furrowed. That made no sense. What behavioral red flag? He checked the timestamp on the withdrawal. It was the same day Jason had been sent to in-school suspension for disruption in Miss Claremont's class. The disruption? According to a memo, Jason had challenged the answer key on a group quiz and been written up for insubordination. The answer key was wrong. Jason had been right. Avery leaned back, disgusted. They didn't block Jason because he wasn't good enough. They blocked him because he questioned authority. Because he didn't play their game. Because silence wasn't submission. It was strategy. And they punished him for daring to be quiet and correct. Avery pulled up the Camp Newton contacts, opened a private email thread with one of the board directors, and sent a message. Subject: inquiry on withdrawn patent. Urgent. Name: Jason D. Miller. District: Elkwood Unified. Query: was the withdrawal initiated from the school or the student family? He hit send. Then he picked up the phone. It was time to call the school directly. But first he recorded everything. Every screen, every link, every cross-reference. He'd seen schools erase digital trails before. He wasn't taking chances. When he finally dialed the school's administrative line, it was 7:58 a.m., just before the office officially opened. He expected to leave a voicemail. Instead, someone answered. Elkwood High, Administrative Office. The voice was male, unfamiliar. Yes, good morning, Avery said. This is Dr. Nathaniel Avery calling. I'm conducting an academic equity review on behalf of the Miller family. I need to confirm a few things regarding Jason Miller's academic history. There was a pause on the line.
Then who authorized this review?
Avery didn't blink. I did. Legally, under open records law, I'm entitled to request data if I'm serving as an external academic advisor on a contested discipline matter. Another pause. Longer. I'm going to need to transfer you. Click. Static hummed. Then a different voice came on, sharper. Female. Elkwood High. Who did you say you were with? Avery repeated himself. Do you have written authorization from the parents? Not yet, but I'm initiating an independent inquiry based on a developing public matter. There's a video of this student circulating widely. The voice didn't respond immediately. Then, we're aware. I'm calling specifically about the Camp Newton withdrawal. There seems to be an inconsistency. The woman cut in. That matter is sealed. Avery narrowed his eyes. Sealed? Yes. Per district order, Jason Miller's extended academic file has been locked pending internal review. That's not legal. He replied. You can't retroactively restrict files that impact scholarship access. The request has been noted, she said, but we can't provide anything further. The line went dead. Avery sat in stunned silence for a moment. They hung up. Not only that, they had sealed his file after the footage went viral. Not before. It was a reaction. A cover-up. He stood, heart pounding now, not with panic, but purpose. They weren't just marginalizing Jason. They were erasing him. He reopened the student directory portal. But access had already changed. The backdoor he'd used an hour ago now redirected to a login page, with a warning. An Atoye site entry will be reported to district security. He cursed under his breath. They were moving fast. Too fast for a normal review process, which meant they weren't just scared of the controversy. They were scared of what else was buried. He checked his email again. A new message from Camp Newton's director. Dr. Avery, thank you for reaching out. We were confused by the sudden withdrawal. The applicant's evaluation score placed him in our top 1% for the year. We reached out to the school for clarification, but never received a reply. His application was closed due to non-response on their end. If the family is still interested, we're open to reopening the file. Avery stared at the screen. Top 1%. Blocked deliberately. That wasn't just bias. That was sabotage. He clicked open a secure document he hadn't touched in years. Systemic obstruction in public education. Case files for federal advocacy. It had been a quiet project, dormant since 2019, when his last report to the Department of Education was buried under red tape. But now it had a name. Jason Miller. He scrolled down to add a new entry. But before he could finish typing, his phone buzzed again. A number he didn't recognize. He hesitated, then answered. Dr. Avery? The voice said, low and fast. I saw your email. Don't call the school again. Who is this? You don't know me. I work for the district. IT team. What you're looking for. Someone doesn't want it found. I already figured that out, Avery said dryly. No, you don't get it. The voice whispered. They didn't just flag Jason's file. They edited it. They added behavior notes after the fact. Stuff that wasn't there 2 days ago. Avery froze. They're building a paper trail to match the accusation. The voice continued. And they're trying to make it look like a pattern. That's how they get away with it. Avery leaned over his desk. Why are you telling me this? Because I've seen it before, and because I was that kid once. Before Avery could ask more, the call dropped. No name, no trace, but enough to confirm his worst fear. This wasn't one teacher's bias. This was an institutional cover-up. He picked up his phone again and redialed the school. Not through the front line this time. He used a faculty contact number from an old staff directory. It rang. Once. Twice. Then. A click. But no voice. Just silence. He waited. Hello? He said. No response. Then the line filled with static. Then a click. The call had been intercepted. Avery reaches out to the school. But the call is intercepted. Dr. Nathaniel Avery stared at the blank laptop screen, his reflection faintly staring back. After the intercepted call, he no longer trusted silence. Not even his own. It was no longer just about Jason. Something deeper was operating behind the scenes. Quiet, calculated, and afraid of being seen. He knew where to look next. Ms. Carol Claremont. On the surface, her record gleamed. 15 years of service, certifications in 2 states. Flawless annual evaluations, praise from district officials, even a photo of her shaking hands with a senator during Teacher Appreciation Week. But Avery had been in this game long enough to know. The more polished the resume, the more likely something's been scrubbed. He didn't want what they printed. He wanted what they buried. Late into the night, he accessed archived internal records using old university and district connections, anonymized staff portals, forgotten data logs, and abandoned PDFs no longer linked on official sites. It didn't take long. The first file hit like a gut punch.
Case file 2017 BR92.
A 6-year-old black boy, Darnell T., was removed from Ms. Claremont's class for being excessively hyperactive. Her report claimed he defied redirection, but a parent complaint stated otherwise. Darnell had been excited about show and tell and interrupted once. The school transferred him quietly to a different program. Claremont stayed. Avery clenched his fists. He kept going. Case file Sun 2019, GS 74. A 12-year-old named Malik B. asked to go to the bathroom a second time in one class period. Ms. Claremont called the school officer, citing verbal aggression. Police were called. Body cam footage later proved there was no threat. Case closed. No apology. No accountability. There were more. Black students suspended for tone, defiance, nonverbal disruption. White students with the same behavior, marked as needing guidance, were redirected with success. The disparity wasn't subtle, it was institutional. But one file stood out among them all. A sealed memo from April. A substitute teacher had reported Claremont for falsifying behavioral incidents. She allegedly built a paper trail of fake misconduct by a black student named Jalen K. to justify suspension. The sub documented it and resigned when the district ignored her warning. The response? Memo sealed. No further action. Avery's heart pounded. This wasn't just bias. It was sabotage. Pre-planned, weaponized policy. He clicked to download the file, but it locked. Access denied. Confidential employee file. He had arrived too late. Then came the anonymous text. Check the district board archive. April 2021. Sealed complaint. Using mirrored browser headers and old admin links, Avery entered through a back-end cache and retrieved the raw memo. It was brief, but damning. The substitute had witnessed Claremont manipulating records midday. Dates didn't match. Details were vague. But the intent was clear. Control the record, and you control the narrative. Avery reached for the phone. He dialed Elkwood's HR department, requesting Claremont's personnel file. Sorry, the voice on the other end said. Her file was sealed this morning, per legal order. His chest tightened. They moved before he did. They were protecting her. But just as he prepared to hang up, a new message hit his inbox. The subject line chilled him. I remember everything, from Jalen. Attached was a voice memo. She made me look like the problem, Jalen said. Every time I raised my hand, she acted like I was challenging her. When I didn't answer fast enough, she wrote me up for being unresponsive. When I smiled at my friend, she called it disruptive energy. I wasn't failing. I was just black and not afraid to look smart. Avery sat frozen. Then a second message dropped. Another anonymous tip. Want proof? Search her 2015 classroom video archive. They forgot to delete one. He clicked the link. A grainy clip loaded. A classroom full of second graders. A black boy standing quietly near the front, shifting nervously. Miss Claremont's voice, calm and clinical. You've lost your desk for today. Sit in the corner. The child didn't move. She sipped coffee while the assistant came and led him away. The date? March. Caption. They've been letting her do this for a decade. Avery didn't need the district's permission anymore. He had everything. But just as he prepared to submit a legal request for records, his laptop shut down, then rebooted. Then flashed red. Unfertilizer tracking detected. Security breach logged. They were watching him now. The district quietly seals her personnel file, just as Avery requests it. The microphones looked like they belonged in a courtroom, not on the front lawn of Denise Miller's home. A semicircle of reporters, producers, and camera operators had formed by 10 a.m., their badges swinging from necks, their eyes scanning the windows, waiting for a headline that would make their numbers spike. Across the street, neighbors watched from porches, unsure whether they were witnessing history or a media ambush. Inside the house, Denise stood motionless in the hallway, staring at her own reflection in a photo frame. Her fingers trembled against her thigh. The silence before the storm had become unbearable. She had not planned on speaking to the press. But after 3 sleepless nights, 2 threatening letters in the mailbox, and 1 anonymous call, suggesting her son had faked everything for attention, she knew silence was no longer protection. It was permission. She walked out the front door slowly, each step deliberate, each breath heavier than the last. When the cameras activated, they didn't capture just a mother. They captured a reckoning. I didn't raise a cheater, Denise began, her voice shaking. I raised a quiet genius, because the world didn't give him permission to be loud. Gasps were subtle. Pens moved. He taught himself algebra at 10. He found math comforting when the world wasn't. He never caused trouble. He never disrespected anyone. But somehow, his brilliance became suspicious. A tear streaked down her cheek, but her voice hardened. He didn't get pulled out because he cheated. He got pulled out because he didn't fit the story they wanted to tell about black boys. She paused, lips trembling, then leaned closer to the microphones. You can't criminalize silence just because you don't understand it. Behind her, the curtains shifted. Jason stood at the window, watching his mother speak truth into a world that had twisted everything about him. But even as her words rang out, he could feel the trap tightening. The media didn't come to understand. They came to edit. Within hours, Denise's speech was online, but not as she delivered it. One local outlet posted a heavily trimmed clip with a headline, "Mother defends student with history of quiet defiance." Another claim, "Mom claims school feared her son's intelligence, despite disciplinary notes." The phrase disciplinary notes was lifted from an internal memo someone leaked anonymously. Fabricated entries added after the incident, painting Jason as a patterned non-participant. The narrative had begun to shift again, not toward justice, toward justification. Denise watched the edits unfold with horror. She opened her phone to see a comment under her video. Maybe if he spoke up in class, none of this would have happened. another said. His mom looks more upset about the cameras than the truth. She turned the phone off. Across town, Dr. Avery sat at his desk, watching the media spin spiral. He had warned her this might happen. He had seen it before. How the truth gets chopped into digestible conflict. How outrage gets defanged by carefully placed doubt. But this time, he wasn't going to stay in the background. He opened his secure server and sent the files, the sealed complaints, the suspended math camp application, the video of the 2015 incident to 4 journalists he trusted, ones who didn't edit for clickbait. Then he called Denise. "You were powerful," he said. "They're twisting everything." "That's what they do when they're scared," he replied. "They want to drown your voice in noise." She didn't answer right away. Then quietly, "He's not eating, he's not sleeping, and now he doesn't want to go back." "Don't force him," Avery said. "Let us build a platform around him. He doesn't have to speak until he's ready." Denise sighed. "But they've made him a symbol, and symbols don't get to rest." Meanwhile, inside Elkwood High, tension simmered. Students whispered. Teachers avoided eye contact in hallways. Some claimed they didn't know the full story, while others defended Claremont as a veteran doing her best. But the cracks were forming. A student-led petition demanded transparency from the school board. Another group planned a walkout, but none of that would matter if the system swallowed the story whole. Then something unexpected happened. At 7:42 a.m., the following morning, Jason was missing from homeroom. No warning, no absence call, no voicemail. He didn't show up. Teachers exchanged glances, but no one said anything. Principal Skinner told the staff not to speculate. By lunch, rumors were everywhere. His family pulled him out. He got a private school offer. Someone threatened him, and he's in hiding. None of it was true. At home, Denise sat in her living room, staring at her son's empty bedroom. The covers were neatly tucked. The window was closed. But his backpack sat untouched in the hallway, exactly where he left it the night before. She hadn't heard him leave. She hadn't seen him at breakfast. He was gone. His phone, unreachable.
His location off.
Dr. Avery's call went to voicemail. By evening, she filed a missing person report, but no one took it seriously. "He's a teenager," the officer said. "Maybe he needed space." "No," Denise replied, her voice shaking. "He's been getting threats. He's been targeted. He's not the type to vanish without saying something." The officer shrugged. "We'll flag it, ma'am." That night, the neighborhood grew still. News vans remained parked down the street. Headlights dimmed. Online, the silence grew louder. Comment sections speculated everything from mental breakdown to cover-up. No one knew where Jason was. Not even his mother. And somewhere, on a quiet street far from Elkwood, a bus camera caught a single image. A boy in a hoodie, looking out the window, eyes empty, heading in the opposite direction of everything he knew. Jason disappears from school without warning. Jason Miller hadn't touched his phone in 3 days. The device sat on the motel nightstand. Screen cracked. Its notifications silent, muted by choice, not by lack of interest. He lay on the stiff mattress, hoodie pulled low, earbuds in with no music playing. The hum of air conditioning masked the thrum of anxiety growing in his chest. He hadn't run away to disappear. He'd run because silence had become the only thing he could control. But silence didn't last in the digital world. Especially not when someone like Theo Vance noticed you. Theo wasn't a teacher. He wasn't a journalist. He wasn't even a parent. He was something the establishment couldn't quite define. A viral mathematician. A black former prodigy who'd built a massive online following by solving elite-level equations, live on stream. Theo's fame came not from academia but from making math perform like jazz. Fluid, brilliant, and unpredictable. He'd seen the video. He'd read the comments. And he didn't like what he saw. Kid solves a test in his head, and they throw him out like trash? Theo said into the camera during one of his streams. Nah, that's not education. That's erasure. Within minutes, Theo challenge began trending on X, formerly Twitter. The post read, "Jason Miller, come solve the same exam live. I'll host it. Unedited. Raw. No tricks. You write it. I verify it. Let the world see what they tried to erase." It spread like wildfire. Theo's followers reposted. Other influencers jumped in. YouTubers broke it down. Conspiracy theorists hijacked it. Pundits debated it. But Jason? He saw it 2 days later, on a borrowed laptop in the motel lobby. A girl from the front desk had recognized him, handed him the computer, and whispered, "They're waiting for you." He scrolled in silence. Videos, threads, edits, fan art, hate pages. It all blurred, until he saw one comment. Just one. If he was really that smart, he'd prove it. But he's hiding, like a coward. He stared at it for a long time. Not because it hurt, but because it was exactly what they wanted him to feel. Powerless. Defensive. Cornered. But something shifted inside him. Not rage. Not even sadness. Just clarity. He emailed Theo that night. One sentence. I'll do it. But the test has to be harder. Theo replied 5 minutes later. I got you. The next 48 hours became a blur of preparation. Not for Jason, but for the internet. Theo announced the live stream date. Friday, 7 p.m. EST. The exact same time the Elkwood School Board was scheduled to hold their internal review meeting. Theo's caption? Let's see who the people believe. The buzz was immediate. The stream was titled Underground Exam, Jason versus the System, and framed like a boxing match. Except the arena wasn't a ring. It was a math problem. Denise found out from a news alert. She called him instantly. For the first time since he vanished, he answered, Jason, I'm okay. You don't have to do this. Yes, he said quietly. I do. She paused. Then don't do it for them. I'm not, he said. I'm doing it for the ones who won't be believed next. She didn't argue. She just whispered. Then make it undeniable. Friday came fast. The stream countdown clock ticked down. 4:59. 4:58. Theo sat in a quiet studio, lit by a single overhead light. Jason sat across from him at a plain desk. No calculator. No notes. Just paper, pencil, and a water bottle. Theo turned to the camera. We didn't give him a practice test. We didn't prep him with the questions. These were pulled directly from grad-level mathematics, differential equations, nonlinear optimization, number theory, beyond anything he'd ever seen. He looked at Jason. You ready? Jason didn't nod. He just picked up the pencil. The timer started. Question 1. An advanced proof problem that required knowledge of factorial primes. Jason read silently for 12 seconds. Then he began writing. Theo said nothing. The chat exploded. No way. He's not even flinching. That's not high school math. Jason moved with focus. He didn't rush. He didn't hesitate. His hands stayed steady. His eyes never darted to the sides. By question 4, Theo leaned in. You've seen problems like this before? No, Jason said, without looking up. But the logic's familiar. It was the first sentence he'd spoken on stream. Theo smiled faintly. The internet went wild. Viewership soared past 2.1 million in under 30 minutes. People weren't just watching for the math. They were watching belief form in real time. Each solution tightened the grip on the false narrative. Each line he wrote made the system look smaller. But back in Elkwood, the school board sat stiffly around a long oak table. Principal Skinner nervously refreshed his phone. The live stream was on every student's screen, even in the hallway outside. Inside the boardroom, they were debating whether or not to issue a formal statement. Let's wait, one member said. Maybe it dies down. It won't, said another. Not with this stream. Skinner stood. We can't let a YouTube stunt dictate our policy. Someone interrupted. He's doing our job better than us. That's the problem. But Jason didn't hear any of it. He was on question 9, a matrix inversion challenge involving irrational eigenvalues. He paused, tapping the pencil gently, and then wrote something that made Theo sit up. You found a shortcut, Theo said. I found the truth, Jason replied softly.
Then he slid the paper forward.
Final question. Complete. Theo took it, examined every line. Then he turned to the camera. Flawless. Silence. Then, the internet broke. In real time, Jason Miller trended in 12 countries. Educators reposted the footage. Mathematicians offered scholarships. Celebrities tweeted support. Even political figures chimed in. But amidst the celebration, a second notification came in. A school board staffer, under pressure from a local journalist, leaked a screenshot of an internal group chat between Elkwood officials. The message? If he passes the live stream, we'll just say he had the answers again. Kids like him don't do that without help. The timestamp was from earlier that day. The internet turned again. Not on Jason, but on the district. Theo leaned toward the camera. You can't unsee what you've seen. The problem isn't his answers. It's the system's silence. Jason sat still, breathing softly, sweat along his temple, eyes half closed like someone who had just finished climbing out of a burning building. But it wasn't over yet. In the final seconds of the stream, a comment flashed on screen. From a verified government account, Federal Civil Rights Division has opened a preliminary inquiry into Elkwood Unified. Jason read it. He didn't smile. He didn't cry. He just sat back in his chair. For the first time in weeks, the silence around him wasn't suffocating. It was his again. His live session is scheduled to go head-to-head with the school board meeting. For 58 uninterrupted minutes, the world watched a black teenager do something the system told him he wasn't supposed to do. Solve. Not guess. Not fumble. Not panic. Solve with clarity. With elegance. With speed. Jason Miller sat beneath a single spotlight in Theo Vance's minimalist studio. His face calm but focused. His pencil moving in precise strokes. There was no calculator on the table. No notes. No formulas scribbled on the back of his hand. Just raw cognition. At first the live chat on the stream fluttered with doubt. He's memorized the answers. They prepped him. There's no way he's doing this live. But by the sixth problem, when Jason used a non-standard transformation method on a problem most grad students would skip, the tone shifted. Comments turned to awe, then apology. Okay, this kid is the real deal. He's not solving, he's composing. This isn't just smart, it's scary smart. The viewer count surged past 12.2 million, a number unheard of for any live academic stream in history. And the stakes? Higher than ever. Because across town, inside Elkwood Unified School District's main building, a different kind of audience sat in a starkly lit boardroom, watching the same feed on a projector. Principal Skinner's hand trembled as he sipped from a paper cup of lukewarm coffee. Ms. Donnelly, seated beside him, scrolled through social media posts with tightening eyes. This is out of control, she muttered. Skinner's jaw clenched. We should have stopped this. One board member, younger, leaned forward. We're not stopping it. We're watching a system collapse. Don't be dramatic, another replied. It's a publicity stunt.
The room fell quiet.
Because Jason had just solved a problem involving four-dimensional vector fields, mentally, and narrated his thought process mid-solution. Theo turned to the camera. That was a graduate-level problem from MIT's Theoretical Math Archive. The chat exploded. MIT. Bro didn't even flinch. He just did that in his head? Jason set his pencil down. Theo slid the paper to the camera. No errors. All logic steps intact. No skipped lines. Silence filled the stream for a moment. An electric global pause. Then the world responded. Universities. Scientists. CEOs. Celebrities. They didn't just praise him. They condemned the system that tried to erase him. Tweets flew. 12 million people just witnessed why gatekeeping genius is a form of violence.
Waste them justice.
Imagine how many Jasons we've lost because they weren't loud enough for us to believe them. Black educator, truth. He didn't raise his hand, so they dragged him out. Think about that. Revolution math. But the real storm brewed inside the district office. Because suddenly, a call came through to Skinner's direct line. He answered reluctantly. Yes. The voice on the other end was calm but sharp. You need to log off the stream. I'm in a board meeting. Now. Before it gets worse. The call dropped. Skinner looked around the room. That was legal counsel. One of the board members scowled. You think we're still going to be protected after this? We handled everything per policy. No, she snapped. We handled it per pattern. And now that pattern is being exposed, in real time to the entire world. Suddenly, Ms. Donnelly's phone buzzed. A new email. She opened it. Froze. Skinner, she whispered. You need to see this. He leaned over. Subject whistleblower file. For immediate release. Attached was a zip folder. She opened it. Inside were screenshots. Unedited copies of the original exam Jason had taken at school, with timestamps. Metadata, audit trail, unaltered. Each answer matched perfectly. And beside it, a PDF version of the official grading report, flagged internally by a district IT administrator, showing that someone had edited the score metadata after the incident to suggest Jason's responses were inconclusive. Skinner's face drained of color. Who sent this? He asked. But before she could respond, another email hit the inbox. From a known investigative reporter. Comment requested before publication. Panic spread through the room like smoke. Meanwhile, back in the studio, Jason sat with his hands folded on the desk, his breathing calm, his posture still, The last question had been completed. The timer had stopped. Theo leaned forward. You've just silenced 1,000 doubters in 60 minutes. Jason didn't smile. He didn't need to. Theo turned to the camera. I've solved math live for years, but I've never seen a mind work like his. And I've never seen a system so committed to burying brilliance before it could bloom. He paused, as if weighing the moment. And now, you've seen it too. The screen faded to black. The stream ended, but the noise only grew louder. Within minutes, news outlets across the globe began requesting interviews. College deans sent scholarship offers. Civil rights groups issued statements of solidarity. Students organized rallies. Hashtags evolved from Justice for Jason to Audit Elkwood. And in the shadows, legal teams mobilized. Because the whistleblower file, it didn't just contain proof. It revealed something else. A pattern of score tampering across multiple years, almost exclusively targeting high-performing black students labeled as behavioral risks. The metadata told a silent story the district thought would never speak. Until now. Inside his apartment, Dr. Avery reviewed the leaked documents with shaking hands. He had seen hints before. In other cases, other districts, but nothing this clear. This undeniable. He picked up his phone, called Denise. She answered on the first ring. It's real, he said. I know, they can't walk this back. They already tried. She replied. But now the world's watching. As the night deepened, Jason sat alone in the studio after everyone had gone. The lights were off now. The desk empty. Just him and the sound of air. Theo returned with a bottle of water.
You okay?
I'm tired, Jason said. Theo nodded. You just shifted something. For real. Jason looked up. Then why do I still feel like they'll find a way to spin it? Because they're used to winning, Theo replied. But not tonight. The boy leaned back in his chair, exhaling slowly. His hands, once shaking in classrooms that never believed in him, were now steady. And just as the moment threatened to settle into calm, Dr. Avery's phone buzzed again. Another email. Subject Elkwood Review. Phase 2. From a second whistleblower. This one internal. And attached a file labeled Disciplinary Forecast Template. Risk flags by demographic. Dr. Avery's eyes widened. They weren't just targeting students after incidents. They were predicting which black students would be labeled problematic before anything happened. And Jason's name? It had been flagged 2 years ago, before Claremont ever met him. A whistleblower emails Avery, attaching the original exam answers. They match exactly. The Elkwood Unified School Board chambers had never seen this many bodies packed into one space. The overflow room filled before the main doors even opened. Parents, students, activists, legal observers, media crews, all pressed shoulder to shoulder, breathing the same charged air. Outside, protest signs waved in unison. We believe Jason. Racism isn't policy. Genius shouldn't be punished. Inside, the board sat on the raised dais behind long wood panel desks, nameplates gleaming, expressions rigid. Principal Skinner sat stiffly at the far right, flanked by Vice Principal Stanton and 2 district lawyers who looked like they hadn't slept in days. Denise Miller sat 3 rows back, eyes fixed forward. Beside her sat Dr. Nathaniel Avery, holding a folder thicker than most court briefs. Every page inside was evidence. Time-stamped, cross-referenced, undeniable. The board chair tapped the mic. We are now in session regarding Agenda Item 7. Academic Misconduct Investigation and System Review related to student Jason Miller. We ask for order and civility. Someone in the crowd muttered. Where was that energy when they dragged him out of class? The room tensed. The first speaker approached the podium. Dr. Avery. He didn't begin with theatrics. He simply opened the folder, placed 3 sheets of paper on the podium, and looked each board member in the eye. This is the original exam Jason took. He said. This is the metadata proving no edits were made on his end. And this, he lifted the 3rd page, is an internal district email acknowledging the score was altered after the incident to discredit him. Murmurs erupted. Cameras clicked. The board chair cleared her throat. Dr. Avery, we understand tensions are high, but this board has protocols. He raised a hand gently. Respectfully, protocol is what's kept this hidden. He tapped another folder. Attached are 6 years of disproportionate discipline data under Ms. Claremont's supervision. Black students were suspended at 6 times the rate of their white peers, often for infractions that were later found unverifiable. In one case, a 5-year-old was written up for threatening posture, just by gasps. He continued. voice calm but unflinching. The student in question, Jason, was denied access to Camp Newton, despite ranking in the top 1% nationally. Why? Because a single disciplinary flag was added the same day he corrected his teacher in class. Skinner shifted uncomfortably. Another board member leaned into the mic. We're not here to debate past administrative decisions. This is a review session. No, Avery interrupted. This is a reckoning. He turned slightly. The only reason you're even holding this meeting is because the truth became too visible to Barry. He tapped his phone. A screen behind him lit up, Theo's livestream playing on loop. Jason's voice echoed through the chamber. I found the truth. The board chair tried to interject. We are in the middle of an ongoing review and can't make conclusions until— You already made them, Denise Miller said, standing suddenly. All eyes turned. She walked to the front. No notes, no script, just raw gravity in her voice. You didn't believe him when he solved quietly. You didn't believe him when he spoke with precision. You waited until 12 million people saw what you refused to. And now you're hiding behind policies you bent to punish him. The room rippled with emotion. Denise turned directly to Skinner. You dragged my child through the mud. You called him inconsistent. You doubted his silence. And when he proved you wrong, you tried to erase him instead of honor him. Skinner looked down. No one on the board made eye contact. From the back of the room, a student stood. Then another. Then 10 more. A chant began. Let him speak. Let him speak. The board chair slammed her gavel. We do not permit unauthorized student commentary during a formal investigation. But the chant only grew louder. The walls vibrated with it. Let him speak. Let him speak. Suddenly the doors at the back of the room opened. The crowd turned. Gasps swept the chamber like wind through dry grass. Jason walked in, hoodie on, hands in his pockets. But he wasn't alone. At his side was someone none of them expected. The former Elkwood superintendent. The man hadn't been seen in public in nearly 2 years. Rumors swirled about his abrupt retirement. Some said it was for health reasons. Others whispered about internal scandals. But tonight he stood beside Jason, taller, older, and visibly furious. They walked down the aisle as the room parted like the Red Sea. Skinner's face went pale. The board chair stuttered. This is highly irregular. The former superintendent raised a folder.
I have something to say.
He handed it to the clerk. Inside were confidential district files, documents revealing score manipulations, student risk algorithms, and internal communications flagging atypical intelligence in underperforming demographics as a potential behavioral red flag. Avery's eyes widened. He whispered, "That's the language. That's the algorithm." The superintendent turned to the room. I was complicit in protecting a system I didn't fully understand. But when I started asking questions about why we were under-enrolling certain students in advanced tracks, I was told to stay quiet. He glanced at Jason. I'm not staying quiet anymore. A hush fell. Every board member stared, stunned. The air felt thin. Every breath came with weight. Then Jason stepped forward. He didn't raise his voice. He didn't demand justice. He simply said, "You never saw me. You just saw what you were afraid I might become." He pulled a folded sheet of paper from his pocket. I brought my test, the one you erased. It's still here, just like me. The room fell into silence so complete, it was deafening. And then the fire alarm went off. Jason walks in, unannounced, with someone shocking at his side. The fire alarm's metallic shriek stabbed through the board chamber like a blade. Yet no one moved. The red strobe lights pulsed against stunned faces, but the room sat frozen in a collective paralysis. Every eye was locked on the man standing beside Jason, the former superintendent, Robert Hendricks, whose unexpected presence had already shaken the meeting to its core. The alarm didn't budge him. It didn't even make him flinch. He stepped toward the podium, his gray suit slightly wrinkled from years of disuse, his posture rigid with a kind of haunted determination. The board chair shouted over the alarm for someone to check the hallway, but Hendricks tapped the microphone, and the room quieted enough to hear his voice cut through the chaos. "This isn't a malfunction," he said. "This is the district trying to end this meeting early." A gasp rippled through the crowd. Cameras zoomed in. Parents stood on their toes. Hendricks looked at Jason, then at Denise, then at Dr. Avery, before facing the board. "I owe you the truth," he said. "All of you." Principal Skinner tensed, whispering harshly into Stanton's ear. Stanton's hands fumbled under the desk, as if searching for a protocol manual that could shield them. Hendricks placed a stack of manila folders on the podium. For over a decade, Elkwood Unified has maintained what they call predictive discipline modeling. It's an algorithm developed at the district level to identify at-risk students. A board member raised a hand sharply. "You are breaching confidentiality." "No," he said, voice unwavering. "I am exposing corruption." The room erupted into murmurs, but one glare from Hendricks silenced it. "The model," he continued, "was sold to us as a tool to intervene early, to support students. But that isn't what happened. It turned into a weapon." Denise covered her mouth. Jason looked down at his shoes, his chest rising in a slow, controlled inhale. Hendricks opened the first folder. Inside were spreadsheets, rows upon rows of student names, flags, behavioral codes, suspension patterns, all color-coded by race. He held one up. Black boys were flagged at a 23% higher rate than white boys, with no behavioral incident recorded, just profile projections. Parents gasped audibly. Reporters scribbled furiously. Hendricks turned towards Skinner. "You remember this?" he said coldly. "You defended it. You said it would help us get ahead of disruption. But what it did was put a target on children before they ever stepped into a classroom." Skinner's face flushed red. "You're misrepresenting." "No," Hendricks snapped. "I'm confessing." The board chair tried to call order, but Hendricks kept going. When teachers like Ms. Claremont wrote vague disciplinary notes, nonverbal defiance, tone issues, visible tension, the system interpreted those as early warning signs. And every time a black student was marked, it made their next disciplinary action faster, harsher, and more permanent. One parent shouted, "You destroyed children." Another yelled, "How many?" Hendricks swallowed hard. "More than I can count." The room grew deadly quiet. He lifted another document, a printed email from "This," he said, "is proof of data suppression." When gifted black students scored in the top percentile, but had even a single behavior flag, the district automatically withheld recommendations for advanced placement tracks. We told parents their child did not meet criteria, but the truth is we buried excellence under suspicion. Stanton stood abruptly. "This is taken out of context." A very shot him a glare sharp enough to cut glass. "Context? You flagged Jason at age 14 for being unusually quiet under pressure. That was in his file before he ever took Miss Claremont's class." A collective gasp shook the room. Jason's jaw tightened. Denise reached for his hand, squeezing it, grounding him. Hendricks nodded slowly. "This isn't new. This didn't start with him. This is a decade-long chain of erasing potential." He opened the next folder. "Here," he said, holding up a document, "is the directive sent to principals. Students with elevated risk profiles should be monitored for academic inconsistencies. Sudden spikes in achievement should trigger integrity audits." He looked directly at Skinner. "You used that directive to justify dragging this boy out of class." Skinner stammered, "Our goal was to maintain fairness." "Fairness?" Hendricks echoed bitterly. "No. You wanted to validate a system that already decided who was allowed to be brilliant." A mother in the crowd shouted shame. Another voice followed. "Fire them all." But Hendricks raised a hand gently. "There's more." He pulled out the last folder. "This," he said softly, "is why I left." The room leaned in. Even the board seemed to shrink into their seats. He unfolded a memo stamped confidential. "It's a list," he explained. "A list of students recommended for performance containment. These were students who scored too high, too fast, and whose profiles didn't match the district's expectations." Someone whispered, "Containment. What does that mean?" Hendricks exhaled heavily. "It means their opportunities were limited. Their contest submissions were lost. Their program applications were delayed. Their advanced placements were full. Their gifted test scores were under review." He set the paper down, and Jason's name was on that list. Twice. A heavy silence choked the room. Jason blinked, stunned. Denise's shoulders collapsed as if the truth weighed twice as much as she expected. Dr. Avery whispered, "My God." Hendricks looked at Jason, voice trembling for the first time. "I'm sorry. I'm so sorry. I didn't stop it when I should have. I didn't fight hard enough." Jason didn't speak. He didn't need to. His silence, once used against him, now thundered across the chamber. Reporters' microphones shot forward. Cameras rolled like hungry eyes. Parents surged from their seats, shouting for resignations, for answers, for consequences. The board chair hammered her gavel desperately. "We are calling a 15-minute recess." "No," a woman shouted. You're running. The board ignored her. One by one, they stood and hurried toward the back exit, as security flanked them, guiding them like cattle through double doors. But in their panic, they forgot one thing. The cameras in the room were still rolling. Every parent, every reporter, every live stream recorder still broadcast. Dr. Avery's phone buzzed. A new email. The subject line appeared on the screen. Leak confirmed. All evidence backed up. They can't erase this. He felt a chill. This wasn't ending. It was only beginning. He looked toward the exit, where the board vanished, and then toward Jason, who stood motionless at the center of the room, the storm swirling around him. The fire alarm ceased abruptly, leaving only the sound of a furious crowd demanding justice. And then, a loud voice from the side of the room pierced the noise. Jason, you need to see this. The room froze. A reporter held up a tablet. Jason stepped forward, hesitant. What he saw on the screen made his breath stop. A new headline, a viral leak, a name he recognized. Miss Claremont, and a hidden camera recording from her own classroom, 10 years ago. The board calls for recess, but the cameras are still rolling. The sun rose over Elkwood High, giving no hint that the world had changed. But it had. Quiet hallways now carried the echoes of something larger than classrooms, something uncontainable. Jason Miller stepped into the school's front entrance for the first time since his disappearance. His backpack was slung over one shoulder, the hoodie tucked neatly in. He walked slowly, eyes focused ahead. Students parted like water around him, some offering nods, others staring openly. He didn't flinch. He wasn't the same boy they once assumed. In his phone inbox sat 3 letters of admission, 3 prestigious Ivy League summer programs, full rides, invitations that many students spent their lifetimes chasing, the sort of things his peers wailed and shrieked for at college fairs. These offers arrived in rapid succession dates, February 28th, March 3rd, March 8th, but Jason didn't smile, not at them, not yet. He walked down to the media tent, outside the school, where cameras and tripods had been set up. A banner hung across the front, Math for All, launch event. Beneath it stood Denise Miller, Dr. Nathaniel Avery, and Robert Hendricks, the retired superintendent. The 3 had formed a tight front, defenders, architects, now movement builders. Denise saw her son and wiped a tear before it traced his name through her mind. She stood, took a deep breath and began. Today, she said, voice steady, yet tender, we're not just talking about a student. We're talking about a community. We're talking about every quiet mind that was silenced, every black student whose brilliance was not visible, because the system refused to see it. The microphones whined. The cameras clicked. Somewhere a flash exploded. Dr. Avery stepped forward. When I saw the live stream, I knew we had a chance to rewrite the narrative, not just for Jason, for all Jasons, for every student told they were invisible because they didn't act loud enough to be believed. Robert Hendricks nodded. He cleared his throat before speaking. I used to oversee this district. I believed the algorithms would help. I was wrong. Today we're launching Elevate Math, a nonprofit that will mentor and advocate for students like Jason, students whose intelligence is quiet, but not passive. A cheer erupted from the crowd of supporters. Black teachers, parents, students, all standing, holding signs, make silence visible. Quiet minds matter. Math is not loud. Jason remained silent until the cheering subsided. He stepped up, looked at his mother, looked at the men beside him, then at the microphones. He didn't raise his voice. He didn't stage a dramatic moment. Instead, he spoke softly, the kind of voice that makes people lean in. I was removed from a test for being silent. But the truth is, I solved it in my head. I didn't need to write, because I already knew, and now I realize, I shouldn't have to change how I learn to fit how others teach. I want to create a space where quiet brilliance thrives, where we don't just award the loudest voice, but praise the clearest mind. He paused. His eyes scanned the crowd. If I can do this, imagine what several thousand Jasons could do when we stop treating silence as threat and start treating it as strength. The moment hung. The sun dipped slightly, as though even the sky waited to respond. Then the crowd erupted again. Over the next few weeks, Elevate Math became more than a press line. It became a movement. Jason gave keynote talks via live stream, mentoring sessions in local libraries, monthly Zoom calls with mentees across the country. Black students who sat back in class, uninterested or so the system said, but who craved challenge. Avery taught them advanced math problems. shared his own story. Hendricks coordinated with education advocates, partnering with local colleges to open quiet study labs for those who didn't thrive in traditional classrooms. At the same time, the backlash returned, not as loud, but as sharp. The school district released a statement: "We support all students achieving their potential. Allegations currently under internal review." Miss Claremont's image was still intact publicly. Teachers and administrators whispered about her in unlocked rooms. The old guard watched the movement with nervous smiles. Jason heard it all. He absorbed the praise. He absorbed the pressure. One evening, at a mentor session, he asked a group of his mentees, "What do you think brilliance looks like?" A girl named Latasha raised her hand. "It looks like someone solving a problem no one else cares about." A boy named Marcus said, "It looks like being invisible and still mattering." Jason nodded. That's it exactly. They watched him. He felt their hope. He felt their weight. Weeks into the movement, the unexpected twist came. The package arrived for Jason at the Elevate Math office. A thin envelope stamped from Elkwood Unified's central office. No sender, just Jason's name typed neatly. Inside, a letter. "Dear Mr. Miller, we are pleased to extend to you a scholarship to attend Camp Newton this summer. We apologize for the delay and invite you to reapply for any future advanced placement program we offer. Sincerely, Elkwood Unified School District." Denise found him sitting at the desk, staring at the letter. "It came," he said. "You're going?" she asked. He looked at her. "No, we already have a path. We're building it. I don't need an apology disguised as opportunity." She nodded. "You're right." Inside, though, he wondered what the district's late offer really meant. Was it remorse? Or a tactic? He let the question sit. The movement grew. Journalists wrote feature stories. How one quiet black teen turned silence into strategy. Colleges followed. The nonprofit's inbox filled with requests for speakers, for partnerships, for funding. Then one evening, Jason received a text. "Interview request. Major network. Tomorrow." He hesitated, but agreed. The night before the interview, he sat with Denise in the living room. They talked in whispers. "I'm proud," she said, "but I worry." He looked up. "We've already done more than they expected." "I know," she said, "but they haven't forgotten, and they can't backtrack." His jaw set. On the day of the interview, bright lights illuminated a studio. He sat across from the host. The camera rolled. The questions came. Smooth, practiced. "What inspired you? Why math? Do you feel vindicated?" He answered each with honesty. Then the host asked, "Some say you turned down Ivy League offers. Why?" He paused. "Because I'm not the only one who deserves a seat. I want others to have theirs." The camera cut to the next segment. After broadcast, viewers sent messages. "So humble, so smart, symbol of change, new face of black excellence." Yet deep in the background, the district's PR team circulated a memo, neutralized narrative by labeling quiet learners as select exceptions. Jason intercepted a copy via his contacts. He showed it to Avery. "You can't just say quiet genius and stop there," Avery said. "They'll call it a novelty." "I know," Jason replied. "And I don't want to be the face of silence anymore. I want to be the voice." The movement transformed again. Elevate Math launched the Quiet Minds campaign. To train teachers, rewrite curriculum, dismantle bias in classroom evaluation. They filmed promotional videos, visited schools in underserved neighborhoods, held symposiums on invisibility and excellence. And while they worked, the old system writhed. Ms. Claremont gave speeches at conferences, sat on committees about student engagement, and nodded earnestly when speakers talked about diversity and inclusion. But Jason's existence had upset her equilibrium. Then came the final moment for this chapter. A video conference link pinged on his computer. The caller ID read, "Claremont Confidential." He opened it. There she sat, her background neutral, her expression unreadable. "Mr. Miller," she said, "I watched your movement. I read the files." Jason paused. Miss Claremont continued, voice low. "I want to ask you something." He leaned forward. "You claim the system failed you," she said. "But when did you decide to make it about everyone else?" Jason's eyes narrowed. "I decided," he said, "when it wasn't just about me anymore." She sat back. "Quiet brilliance is not the solution," she whispered. "It's the symptom of your own bias. We reward silence because we fear it. We validate loudness because it's comfortable." Jason felt a chill. "This is your fight, Mr. Miller. Not ours. The call ended. Jason stared at the blank screen for a long moment. He exhaled. He looked at the movement, at the students, at his mother, and then the screen flickered. Ms. Claremont gives a secret interview and blames implicit bias. The email request started slowly. A few concerned parents, some curious journalists, and one legal intern from the ACLU sent polite inquiries to Elkwood Unified's public records officer. But within 48 hours it turned into a flood. Freedom of Information Act, a FOIA, requests piled into the district's inbox. Hundreds by the day, thousands by the end of the week. They came from national organizations, investigative podcasts, education equity groups, and even former employees. The targets of the requests were eerily specific. Internal memos about predictive behavioral algorithms. Edits to academic files of students flagged for non-traditional behavior. All communications referencing Jason Miller, from January to April. Inside the district office, panic had replaced posture. Staff were told to withhold certain files for further review, while legal teams combed through years of emails trying to distinguish between what could be redacted and what would blow everything apart. But it was too late. What emerged from the deluge wasn't just disturbing. It was damning. In one unsealed chain from 2020, a senior administrator referred to a black honor student as academically erratic because she improvised in her explanations during oral presentations. A notation followed, monitor for future integrity concerns. In another, a memo sent to high school counselors instructed them to prioritize trust-based candidates for external honors nominations, defined loosely by teachers' comfort level with students' personalities. The unspoken bias screamed from the subtext. Black students were being disqualified from advanced opportunities, not because they weren't achieving, but because their personalities didn't conform to what was deemed stable, predictable, or easy to guide. The data told its own story. One spreadsheet, leaked from an internal server, revealed the district had withheld over 71 invitations to elite math camps and science programs in the past 3 years. Over 63% of those blocked invitations were tied to Black or Latino students with no disciplinary records. The kicker? Most of those invitations were never even communicated to the families. They had been intercepted, softly declined on behalf of the students, without their knowledge. The excuse given in the internal system did not meet social maturity benchmarks. Dr. Avery was among the first to speak out publicly. "This is not just mismanagement," he said at a televised town hall. "This is engineered academic suppression. These students weren't overlooked. They were targeted and filtered out before they even had the chance to rise." Parents began organizing. Class action lawsuits formed. Civil rights attorneys moved into Elkwood, requesting deposition schedules, subpoenas, and interviews. And finally, the email that changed everything leaked on national television. It was from a district executive, dated a year prior. The subject line read, "Screening the extreme." Inside, the executive wrote, "We must focus on keeping the classroom dynamic smooth. That means removing the ones who pull too much attention. The loud ones disrupt, the quiet ones manipulate. Filter both." It was signed with initials only, TH.
Within 24 hours, the Department of Education's Office for Civil Rights issued a formal announcement.
"We are launching an official investigation into Elkwood Unified for potential civil rights violations regarding racial discrimination in academic opportunity and disciplinary protocol." News trucks set up permanent outposts outside the school. State legislators issued statements. Hashtags shifted once again, now focused on policy change, not just personal justice. But the most explosive revelation hadn't yet surfaced. A parent advocacy group called Truth Trekkers uploaded a video at 7:41 p.m. on a Wednesday evening. It had no title, just a one-sentence description. What they say when no one's watching. The video began with grainy footage, clearly from a hidden camera planted inside a district leadership meeting room. The image was slightly tilted, the edges of the frame catching water bottles, loose documents, and blurred faces. But the audio was clear. In the middle of the video, one voice, deep, amused, could be heard laughing softly. "I'm telling you," the voice said, "it's the quiet ones that scare me the most. You expect a loudmouth to disrupt a lesson, but these kids, the ones who just sit and stare and somehow ace the test, those are the ones you gotta filter out early." There was more laughter. Another voice added, "We call it classroom insurance. Weed out the noise at both ends of the spectrum." Someone else chimed in. "Loud ones, quiet ones. Same outcome if you manage it right." Laughter again. The clip ended with a joke. You know the game. Just keep the herd manageable. The video spread across social media within minutes. Millions watched it before the district could even confirm its authenticity. By morning, a top Elkwood administrator was identified as one of the voices. Thomas Hall, Deputy Director of Student Assessment. His resignation came swiftly, but the damage couldn't be undone. CNN ran the footage on a loop. MSNBC labeled it, the Elkwood Exposé. Social commentators drew comparisons to redlining, school-to-prison pipelines, and historical patterns of silencing black excellence under bureaucratic banners of control. Jason watched the footage alone in his room. He didn't cry. He didn't scream. He sat in silence just like he used to in class. Except now, the silence wasn't his prison. It was his power. His phone buzzed. Theo Vance had posted. They filtered out the loud ones.
They filtered out the quiet ones.
Maybe they were just scared of brilliance. They couldn't control. The comment section lit up with thousands of responses. And in the backdrop, the government's investigation widened. Other districts were put on watch. New legislation was drafted to make predictive algorithms in public education fully transparent and federally audited. But in Elkwood, people weren't just watching anymore. They were demanding. Outside the school, students marched with banners. We are the ones you filtered. Brilliance is not a threat, and end algorithmic bias now. Denise stood at a podium that had once held apology letters. Now it held blueprints for change. But before she could begin, her phone vibrated. A new leak. From a news source.
One sentence.
They weren't just filtering students. They were tracking parents too. She looked at Dr. Avery. His eyes narrowed. This just got deeper. A hidden camera leak shows a top official joking about filtering out the loud ones, and the quiet ones too. The auditorium lights dimmed. A single spotlight warmed the stage, casting a soft glow on the podium at the center. The banner behind it read, Elevate Math National Summit 2029, 5 years after the eruption of the movement that began in a high school hallway. The seats were filled with teachers, students, administrators, and parents from every corner of the country. On the stage stood Jason Miller, older now, shoulders broader, voice stronger, but still that quiet presence, who solved the unsolvable in room 3. He began speaking, his tone steady yet charged. I didn't start this because I wanted attention. I started this because silence kept being criminalized. The audience leaned forward. Even the ones who knew his story found themselves still discovering its gravity. The medals and plaques behind him reflected light. But not the story. His legacy was in what the light revealed, not what it shone on. Years earlier, when the cameras first rolled and the school board door burst open, Jason had been the target of an injustice. Now he was the torchbearer, rewriting the rules. Elevate Math had grown. It had over 1,000 mentees across 30 states, quiet black students in suburban schools, rural districts, inner-city classrooms, all now had a voice and a choice. When Jason looked out at the crowd, he recognized faces, kids who once sat invisible, now standing. He didn't mention the Ivy League offers again. He didn't have to. The offers were not the point. The point was the movement. Because brilliance, he said, cannot be limited to halls of prestige. It belongs everywhere. We teach them calculus, he told the audience. But we also teach them this. Your quiet is your tool, not your label. He paused, letting it breathe in the room. Staff nodded. Parents wiped tears. Teachers leaned in. Then came the unexpected twist. From the back aisle, a figure stood, Miss Carol Claremont, the same teacher who had once accused, removed, and suppressed him. She walked up the steps of the auditorium while Jason spoke. Cameras tilted toward her. Gasps fluttered. Murmurs echoed through the crowd. Jason paused mid-sentence. The spotlight shifted to her. Claremont stopped at the side stage, microphone in hand. Her voice came calm but cold. Mr. Miller, she said, your legacy is remarkable. The crowd shifted uneasily. She didn't smile. She didn't take applause. She simply stood, eyes fixed on Jason. He listened. He didn't let his expression reveal surprise. For years he had prepared for confrontation, but not necessarily reconciliation. She continued, what I once saw as defiance, I now see as distinction. What I once marked as disruption, I now recognize as resilience. A pause. But I hope one thing changes, that you don't let this legacy be about me anymore. Then she walked off. The room exhaled. The twist hung in the air. The perpetrator had shown up, publicly acknowledging fault, yet not offering apology, only reflection. Jason processed it privately, while the audience buzzed. It wasn't a victory lap, it was a reckoning. Later, when the reception lights came on, Jason moved through the crowd. He greeted his mentees by name, handed certificates, shook hands with educators. Denise watched from the side, proud. Dr. Avery stood in the corner, smile quiet, but proud. Robert Hendricks engaged in a deep conversation with a school board member about revising discipline policies. The movement had rippled outward. During the event, Jason's phone buzzed. He stepped aside and read the message. Good job. Let's talk soon. So, he looked at it, then put the phone away. He didn't respond publicly. That night, in his hotel room, Jason sat on the edge of the bed. He removed his blazer and let the weight fall to the floor. He found a small box on the nightstand that wasn't his. Inside, a folded sheet of paper. He opened it. It read, I kept one record. I want to send it to you when you're ready. See, his chest tightened. Old hurt surfaced. For a moment he wondered if this was genuine or another attempt to manipulate the narrative. But he folded the letter and put it in his jacket pocket. Weeks passed. Schools across the country adopted new discipline policy templates. Quiet study labs were opened. The mathematics departments at several universities created scholarships specifically for quiet black learners. The Supreme Math League changed its selection criteria to remove class participation penalties. These systemic shifts bore his name now, not as a symbol but as standard. At Elevate Math's headquarters, a wall was covered in photos. Students solving problems in libraries, mentees smiling at graduation, teachers standing beside their quiet learners who once sat at the back of the class. Jason walked by, looked at a photo of a girl named Tamara, who had once been told you don't show interest because she didn't raise her hand. Now she was receiving a university scholarship in applied mathematics. Denise appeared beside him. She placed her hand on his arm. You changed the game. He nodded. They're still going to fight it. But this, it's ours. She smiled. Your legacy will outlive all of us. But even as the words warmed him, a chill ran through his mind. Because at the top of the wall, behind glass, was a framed original test booklet, the one he'd taken that day in room 3B. It sat with a plaque, solved mentally, removed publicly. For years it remained locked behind glass. Now it was unlocked. Visitors touched its case. Jason stared at it. It felt tangible, like a scar. Then came the final twist. At midnight, his phone buzzed again. This time, a video file from an unknown number. He opened it. On the screen, Miss Claremont, in a classroom, asking a student a question. The camera angle was hidden, low. The student answered. The teacher nodded approvingly. Then she whispered, loud enough to hear, quiet brilliance terrifies me. Jason froze. He rewound. The audio confirmed it. The moment he recorded nearly a decade ago, recorded by a different whistleblower, had emerged again. He sat back. The legacy he'd built glowed around him. Scholarships, policy change, movement. But the root of his story still pulsed. Days later, on the anniversary of his removal from the math exam, Jason's mailbox received a standard-looking envelope. The return address Elkwood Unified School District. Inside, a letter. It read, to the student we once underestimated, learning from our mistakes. CC. The initials matched. He paused. He didn't smile. He didn't fold it. He simply looked at the old building's silhouette through his hotel window, the movement's banner flapping in the wind outside. And he realized, even when you change the game, you still might need to defend the rulebook. On the anniversary of his removal, he receives a letter from Miss Claremont. They didn't believe his silence could hold genius. They saw his skin before they saw his mind, and they nearly buried brilliance under bias. But Jason didn't break. He built. For every unheard voice, he made them listen. If this story shook something in you, type yes. If you believe silence should never be punished, subscribe if this broke your heart.